Thanks very much, Yasmin. I probably shouldn't say too much about the roundtable, just in case the Prime Minister or the Treasurer are in the room. I want to begin my remarks by recognising that we're on the lands of the Ngunnawal people, traditional custodians of the land upon which we're all gathered today. I want to recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community, and extend that respect to elders past and present, and of course any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are with us today. As well as yourself as Chair, Yasmin, can I acknowledge Patrick Kidd, the CEO of Future Skills Organisation, a number of other familiar faces from the other JSCs, the Secretary of the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations, Natalie James, and other officials of the department, industry and union leaders and advocates, and other distinguished guests. Can I also apologise for my late arrival? Qantas gave me a lovely text message late last night. So I understand, though, I was not alone in being disrupted. That said, it is a real pleasure to be able to be here at the FSO National Forum. And thinking about today's theme, as well as next week's theme, today's theme, though, innovate, integrate, engage, vet in partnership with industry, it really couldn't be a more timely conversation. As technology is reshaping the way in which each of us and all of us live and work, the need for strong, forward-thinking partnerships between vocational education and industry has never been greater. In the Albanese government, we recognise too that lasting workforce solutions will always come from collaboration, when employers, unions and governments can come together in a shared purpose. And with that in mind, I really do see this forum as a chance to build those connections and strengthen them, to spark new ideas and strengthen the networks too that will help us prepare Australians and all Australians for the jobs of tomorrow in IT, in IT, in AI, in science and beyond. Now, we didn't, of course, in this regard, start from scratch. When we came into government in 2022, Australia faced the worst skills shortage in 50 years, the second worst across all advanced economies. It was clear then to Minister O'Connor and to others that we needed a new approach if we were to close the skills gaps that were holding Australians back and our economy back too. And fundamentally, that's why we established the 10 Jobs and Skills Councils, to bring together employers, unions, governments, training providers and other stakeholders, working alongside that great national asset that is Jobs and Skills Australia. And it was remiss of me not to recognise Megan Lee down the back earlier in that regard. I do want to recognise here and acknowledge the development of FSO from establishment to today, and to call out the significant work that you've done to become a respected voice from and for the finance, technology and business sectors. This work is underpinned by comprehensive workforce plans, of which there are now 3. These plans drive a huge body of work to tackle workforce and skills challenges, making a real difference for learners and their career paths, as well as for our economy. Importantly, what I'm seeing is collaboration across states and territories and with other JSCs to push forward key initiatives to build a more connective and responsive skills system. Now, as the Minister for Skills and Training in the Australian Government, my job is to ensure that your understandings and your work is matched by a clear vision for the role skills and training play in supporting a labour market that is productive, responsive and inclusive. In short, that vision is to ensure that our government delivers a fit-for-purpose skills and training system in partnership with states, territories and workplace partners. A system that ensures Australians are able to get the skills they need to work in the areas where they are needed most. A system that ensures that no Australian is held back and no Australian is left behind. But more than this, a system that ensures that every Australian has an opportunity for tertiary education, whether delivered through VET or the higher education system. Now, the urgency of all of this was demonstrated with the Jobs and Skills Summit being the first major initiative in the Albanese government's first term. And in our second term, going to your introduction, Yasmin, skills will feature prominently on the agenda at next week's Economic Reform Roundtable. And with that in mind, last week, Minister Clare and I brought together voices from industry, academia, unions, schools and government to talk about how we can better connect Australians with higher education and how those pathways can lead to secure and rewarding jobs. It's all about making the journey clearer and more accessible for everyone. And in that light, your workforce plan points out that efforts to close skills gaps often miss the mark. They're scattered, sometimes, in fact, probably often duplicative, and not always aligned with what employers actually are looking for. And that's why, to my mind and to our government's mind, the National Skills Agreement is so important. My predecessor, Minister O'Connor, worked closely with states and territories to rebuild and strengthen our vocational education and training system, to build an agreement that is designed to make VET more responsive, accessible and high quality, so that it can better support productivity and meet the needs of today and tomorrow's economy. And of course, one of the key national priorities identified in the agreement is boosting Australia's digital and tech capabilities. Your plan too makes it clear that we need a joined-up approach, one that brings together education, migration and industry to close the finance workforce gap. And through our tertiary harmonisation reforms, we're also working to connect VET and higher education providers with industry and governments too, to help students move more easily through the system, whether they're starting out, reskilling or upskilling. Now, the workforce plan for 2025 also highlights a big challenge that we're facing. Australia is going to need up to 350,000 more skilled professionals in finance, tech and business by the end of the decade. And the ground beneath our workforce is shifting. We're seeing the effects of an ageing population, rapid digital change and the rise of generative AI. All of this is putting pressure on employers, learners, educators and the broader training system just to keep up. Now, you'll hear more about this later, but I'm really looking to, I say later because I'm anxious as to what happened with my interference with the agenda. So if it wasn't later, hopefully we can tidy up the transcript with Copilot or something like that. But I am looking forward to seeing how the Skills Accelerator FI will share and scale best practices in AI skill development as we move forward. Research by the Tech Council shows us AI has the potential to contribute more than $100 billion a year to the Australian economy by 2030. We can't realise this opportunity without giving Australians the skills to leverage it. So this new strategic partnership bringing employers, industry and training providers to the table will help us close a pretty big AI skills gap. As with the FSO, our government is maintaining its focus on the transformative effects of generative AI. Along with innovation, it will also be on the agenda at the Economic Roundtable. Jobs and Skills Australia will very shortly publish its capacity study on generative AI and its implications across the labour market and education and training systems. This study will provide critical insights to advise government on how we can best respond to the generative AI opportunity. The study looks at labour market impacts, including potential implications across occupations and industries into the medium term. I would like to commend FSO for the leadership role it's taken in its research on the impact of generative AI on workplace skills and training needs, and how this work has been a really important contributor to JSA's capacity study on generative AI. Now, before wrapping up, I want to return to a core commitment the Albanese government has made since 2022, and that is no one left behind. In this regard, the workforce plan that you've put together makes it clear there's more work to do. Diversity gaps persist across finance, technology and business. They're holding back both individuals and the potential of industry. Women make up less than a third of the tech workforce, and that number is actually slipping. First Nations people with disability remain significantly underrepresented, each accounting for less than 1% of the workforce. Young people, especially from regional parts of Australia, like the part that Yasmin was telling me she comes from in regional Victoria, continue to face barriers to accessing high skill opportunities. This isn't solely about fairness. It's about future-proofing the sector and our economy more broadly. Because a more diverse workforce brings fresh perspectives, drives innovation and better reflects the communities and the customers we should all be intending to serve. It also opens up new talent pipelines at a time when demand is growing fast, sometimes exponentially fast. Bridging all of these gaps can't only be shouldered by government. We've put building blocks in place, but without buy-in from business and industry, we won't see the results that the Australian economy needs. So, I want to sincerely recognise and acknowledge the work of the FSO for the leadership shown in the Workforce Plan for 2025. Your work, together with that of the other Jobs and Skills Councils, is helping Australia take real practical steps to address one of the most pressing skills challenges we've faced in some time. thank you all, this is a big room, for being here today and for your continued support of FSO's mission. I really do hope that today's conversation sparks new ideas, deepens some of the partnerships that are already in this room, and helps us all move closer to a future where our workforce is ready for the opportunities ahead. Thanks very much.
Well, congratulations on making it to Canberra. What an extraordinary day it was in the airports. May I invite folks to submit a question to the Minister? I have naturally left the iPad down there, which someone will run up to me now, I'm sure. I have lots of questions. Explain to me, if you would, how this is going to work next week. When I look at the agenda, thank you so much. When I look at the agenda for the Productivity Roundtable, the Treasurer's Economic Summit, Session 2 has Barney Glover and a couple of others, Jennifer Westacott, who is a University Vice-Chancellor, Martin Parkinson, who's now a University Vice-Chancellor as well. But skills seems to be siloed in that second session, whereas it seems to be integral to pretty much every conversation on the day. How do you ensure that it is?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not sure we've got the time that's going to allow me to fully explore it. What I'd say as my starting point is, if you look at the 5 references we gave as a government to the Productivity Commission in the lead up to this process, one directly goes to skills and training and is just out and provides some interesting reflections. But if you look at pretty much all of those references, skills and training are absolutely critical to realising our national aspirations and ambitions. And certainly that's how I approach my role. I don't think the responsibilities that I have, together with my counterparts in the states and territories, are ever the answer to any of the national challenges we're talking about, but they're always part of the answer. And when I think about the role of the portfolio, I guess that's the first frame that I try to bring to mind, that it's facilitative of national goals, and to think about how the system can be a bridge between the capacities, the ambitions, the aspirations of individual Australians and the national goals that we are seeking to achieve. And hopefully that is something that will flow through the presentations and the conversations next week. And certainly, I think I can say this, it will be a big part of the work that's for me at some point after that roundtable.
Yeah, I'm interested just to dive into that a little bit more. If you think about what Sally McManus was saying a week ago, a really interesting interview on Insiders. What's productivity? It's about investment in machines, capital equipment, people, and ideas. So it's absolutely fundamental. And before you arrived, Melinda Salento from CEDA was talking about the necessity for industry and education and training providers to really accelerate skills reform. Just talk to me about how you perceive the urgency of that need.
Well, I guess the first point is this is not a peculiarly Australian phenomenon. The OECD has highlighted flatlining labour productivity growth as a real challenge across all advanced economies. The other side to it, which is something that I think can be overlooked in the skills side of this conversation, is the participation element of the conversation. In my remarks earlier, I touched on the challenge of an ageing population. And with that in mind, I think there's 2 big bits of work for skills to do to meet the challenge of maintaining our living standards. And if I open up a little bracket, Ellen, we're not talking about productivity growth for its own sake. We're talking about it as the principal means by which we can maintain our living standards in the future. So we want, in respect of my responsibilities, more people to be working to their potential, and we also want more people to be working. So both of those things matter. So we're looking both at upskilling existing workers, better matching the skills that workers have to opportunities and demand in the labour market, better enabling us to realise the benefits of technology, and in so doing to incentivise the sort of capital investments that I imagine Melinda was talking about when I was grinding my teeth at Melbourne Airport. But also to make sure that simply we have more people doing some of the work that we need to do. And the other little bracket I think we've got to open up here, which I'm sure will feature in the conversations next week and around next week, is how can we better manage productivity in the non-market sector?
And so then the question is, from your point of view, whose responsibility is that? A lot of people turn around and say, well, that's the responsibility of government. Government trains people. Melinda had some statistics I'm sure you're aware of about the rapid decline in the amount of actual upskilling and training that goes on within the employment setting. What's your call around that?
Yeah, again, it's a really big question. Obviously, we have made very, very significant investments in skilling Australians. The $30 billion National Skills Agreement, separately but related, obviously free TAFE, which has now seen 650,000 enrolments, all in courses which relate to work that we need doing, around 170,000 completions in that. But I think we also have to look at all of the ways in which we incentivise investment in human capital development. I think it is concerning at one level that we haven't actually kept track of employer investment in Australia. I think our most recent data goes back 20 years. In comparable countries, it's every year or every second year that you've got that data. So we do need to think about, as well as incentivising individual Australians through, for example, free TAFE and the sort of incentives we're offering to key apprenticeship programs, to think about how we can get more businesses to better leverage their investment.
The themes that will come up in the day, I'm sure, is it doesn't matter where you go, what conference you're at, Minister. You look at the Federation and you go, if you had your time over, you'd probably have another crack at that, wouldn't you? So the question here is, the vet sector needs to train faster with more agility. And how can we do this when we're confined by a slow and outdated training package system? Is it time to jettison training packages and adopt a more adaptive training model that meets our current and future needs? It's possibly easier to change the Constitution of Australia than to get a national skills standard up, right?
Well, if I actually felt that, I'd probably be looking to do another job, Ellen. But maybe, again, a couple of points. I'm conscious I see Cam and Craig here, so I've got to be very kind to all jurisdictions in Australia. I think the truth of the matter is that everything the Commonwealth seeks to do to support our national interest, our national priorities in the training system, we do in partnership. And I think of all the things that I like to talk about, it's to emphasise that. The biggest blocker, I think, in recent history when it comes to realising the great asset that is the talents of Australian people has been the fact that we had a decade without a skills agreement, so that we didn't have a joined-up approach to skills and training between the Commonwealth and states and territories, let alone some of the issues about harmonisation and credit transfer between the two tertiary sectors. So having that partnership, I think, is absolutely fundamental, and instilling that partnership with a clearer sense of purpose, which I think the National Skills Agreement does, is fundamental. When we look at the detail, though, of how we ensure that training is relevant, I'll say training rather than training packages, I think that is one of the real conversations where the rubber's hitting the road, particularly as in some trades, some fields, electrification is changing everything, and in everything, technology and particularly AI is changing. So this challenge of how we can maintain the social licence of trades on the one hand, and on the other ensure that work is fit for contemporary and future purpose is a really tricky one. And that's why we've got 10 Jobs and Skills Councils and some excellent officials in each of the 8 jurisdictions.
And I guess the point for this group of people talking about this industry is the pace at which the Commonwealth needs to work with the states to update the framework for training and skills, because it's changing so quickly within AI. And that might lead us to this next question. Do you think it would be useful, this is from the Finance Sector Union, Angela Budai, who's in the audience, would it be useful to build an AI transition plan in the same vein as energy transition plans to support workers who are displaced as a result of technology, and to ensure that government and private companies share the cost and the cost isn't borne by displaced individuals? So in other words, not only about, she's thinking about the workers there, but also the pace of change is so fast that you're going to need to update much more quickly how new training standards and packages come to market in the Federation.
Yeah, well, the short answer is to that proposition, Ellen, yeah. I think on the direct question, I'd firstly say, Angela, I don't want to speak to Tim Ayres' book, so I'll leave that question to him. But I will say that the issue that you raise is fundamental to my consideration of my role, and fundamental, I think, to how I think about how we approach foundation skills and lifelong learning in Australia. I'm really concerned to make sure that no Australians are left behind in the performance of their work or their ability to participate in society more broadly by being victims of a digital or technological divide. And thinking about how we bridge that through the systems for which I'm responsible is a big part of, I guess, how I'm spending my time right now, as I also think about how the skills and training systems, rather than system in this case, fit in with the government's wider approach to ensuring that we are generating all of the benefits we can from rapid technological advance, going back to the productivity proposition that I think Melinda's question was put to me through you a little while ago, Ellen, while ensuring that people are not left behind as workers or as citizens.
Will the federal government fund a digital apprenticeship? There's a question.
Well, what's FSO telling me? There's a lot of discussion at the moment about the expansion of earn and learn models around the care sector and indeed the digital and technology sector. I think there are some interesting models here, and with both the South Australian and Victorian Skills Commissioners here, perhaps we could resolve some of the issues while we're all together. But I'd make two quick points on that. Firstly, I do think there is a really big bit of work in Australia around making sure our apprenticeship model at large is fit for purpose. There's a review sitting on my desk that I'm working through that presents some challenges to government, to industry, to unions, to workers that we need to get right. And we also need to think about how we use earn and learn models to effectively attract people to the industries where we know skills are required in the future, and we ensure that all of our apprenticeships do what they say on the tin, which has been a challenge. We still have completion rates which are far less than we would like. We have a range of challenges around treatment and training of apprentices that we've got to get right as well. I don't think any of that mitigates against looking to expand the model. I think we're all looking at keen interest to the various pilots around higher apprenticeships, which has been a big focus of discussion around the Skills Minister's table. And I think that is obviously not the whole box and dice when it comes to the concept of digital apprenticeships. But I think that those are the things that are on my mind as I think about that concept.
Just before I let you go, I'm getting to understand how you're thinking. You're thinking about quality. You're thinking about inclusion, which is kind of developing as a philosophy of this government, this idea of progressive patriotism. Everybody's got to buy in. Everybody's got to have a stake in the success of the joint, or you end up with kind of a threat to democracy, don't you, if you have enough inequality in a system. I wonder to what extent you think moving quickly, moving at pace to ensure the training system can adapt and evolve quickly to meet changing digital requirements, AI needs, is important. Where does that rank in what you say is important for you to do as a leader?
Oh, look, it's really important. I mean, it goes to the two axes that you talk about, making sure that we're doing everything that we can to grow the economy in a way that maintains living standards in the future, yes, and doing so in such a way that we are very mindful of the distributional consequences, not just economically, as you say, but in terms of, our sense of connection as a community, as a nation. So that is really the really critical tension point, making sure, in my view, that every member of the Australian community is able to access the skills that they need, recognising that the skills need to be flexible and adaptive to a world of work that is changing very, very rapidly, whilst maintaining a sense of integrity that's really important to social licence across most professions and trades. That is the tension point, and I think recognising that and recognising the critical importance of partnerships, tripartite partnerships in particular, is the best way through.
And that sense of urgency and pace, where does that rank for you? Because there's a lot of frustration in this room about the fact that, as you said in your speech, the ground's shifting beneath people, and the way in which we adapt and update and ensure that the training programs and systems can move at a similar pace. Now, is that on your agenda?
Very much so, but I guess the caveat, and everything has a caveat in this conversation, Ellen, so apologies, but I am a politician. The first one is to recognise that many of the skills shortages, probably all of them, didn't come about yesterday. They relate to some long-run decisions or failures to make decisions. So I think we can't... In acting with urgency, we've got to be considered and look to fix the next problem, not the last problem. And I think it is important to take a little step back and think about, in tribute to my predecessor, Brendan O'Connor, how well placed we are compared to most comparable advanced economies because of the institutional framework we now have in place. I think Jobs and Skills Australia is an incredible national asset because it gives us the capacity not just to understand the labour market, but a really deep analytical capacity that sits alongside that can enable us not to fix the training packages that are seen as being super urgent today, but to look beyond the short term and to think about how we can deliver the sort of structural reforms that will build a training and skills system that will support our national interest, not to 2026, but well into the future. I guess that's really, for me, the challenge that I'm excited by. Obviously, cost of living pressures, the need to get through today is absolutely imperative. If we don't deal with the short term, there will be no long term. But if we get overwhelmed by the urgent at the expense of the important, we'll end up back where we started. And I guess that's the challenge that dominates my thinking.
Yeah. So good for you to share your thoughts with us all, and a heroic effort getting here today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Ellen.
That's great. Thank you. It was fascinating. All right, may I invite panel one to the stage, Melinda Salento to join us back on the stage. Also, Jan Owen, who is the Principal of Adaptability Q, Craig Robertson, Victorian Skills Authority, he's the Executive Officer there, and Natalie James, Secretary of the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations. Can I ask you to feed your questions for this panel through quite quickly, and we'll get ourselves back on track time-wise after quite an extraordinary day. All right.